The stars looked peaceful that day, scattered across the black ocean of space like tiny fires burning in the distance. From the viewing window of the human ship, the sight was breathtaking. For the men and women inside, it wasn't just another trip into space, it was history in motion. Humanity was finally joining the Galactic Council, a federation that ruled over hundreds of intelligent species across the galaxy. It was the first time in human history that Earth had been invited to stand as an equal among alien civilizations. Or at least that's what everyone had hoped. The ship glided toward the shining city station of Vetra Prime, the home of the Council. Its surface was alive with light, each tower rising like crystal spires from a glowing sea. The human delegation had trained for months for this day, learning alien customs, studying protocols, and rehearsing words of peace. Everyone understood the weight of this mission. Humanity's wars had made the galaxy nervous, but their quick progress in technology and diplomacy had finally earned them a place at the table. Inside the ship, the mood was a mix of nerves and quiet pride. Some stared silently out the windows, lost in thoughts of Earth, the blue planet that had dreamed for centuries of reaching this far. Others adjusted their formal uniforms, trying to hide the tension behind calm faces. They were not soldiers today. They were voices of a planet asking for peace. When the ship finally docked, a soft vibration filled the floor as the airlock connected. The crew held their breath. Then the doors opened, revealing a grand hall glowing with golden light. Alien guards stood at the sides, tall, silver-skinned beings with expressionless faces. The humans walked forward together step by step, carrying the flag of Earth with quiet pride. The council chamber was enormous, like a cathedral floating in the stars. Hundreds of representatives from different worlds filled the circular hall. Their colors, shapes, and movements were strange but fascinating, some with wings, some with glowing eyes, others floating on invisible energy. And in the center stood a raised platform where the council leaders waited, towering figures of ancient species who ruled the Federation with power and tradition. When the humans entered, whispers filled the room. Some eyes glowed with curiosity, others narrowed with suspicion. One alien leaned toward another and murmured something that made them both laugh softly. The translator on the human diplomat's wrist buzzed, but she quickly turned it off. She didn't need to hear the words to understand the tone. The council leader spoke first. His voice echoed like thunder wrapped in silk. He welcomed the humans formally, his words polite but cold. He praised Earth's scientific progress and survival through hardship, but every compliment carried a hidden edge, like a reminder of how far behind humanity still was compared to the rest of the galaxy. The human representative stepped forward and spoke in a steady voice. He thanked the council for the invitation and said humanity came with a heart open to peace. He talked about the lessons learned from centuries of conflict, the cost of war, and the hope of unity. His words were simple but full of sincerity. Some council members listened with interest. Others whispered again. A few even smirked. To them, humans were still newcomers, too emotional, too unpredictable, and far too young to be trusted with power. Over the next few days, the meetings continued. The humans attended session after session, listening, learning, and trying to contribute ideas for fair cooperation between species. But slowly something became clear. Every time a human spoke, their words were dismissed or talked over. When they suggested a new trade route, it was ignored. When they spoke about shared defense, they were told they lacked the experience. It wasn't open hostility, not yet. It was something worse, quiet disrespect hidden behind politeness. At dinner gatherings, some alien delegates refused to sit near the humans, saying their biology might cause discomfort. In official photos, humans were placed at the edges, never near the center. The media broadcasts from the station painted Earth's presence as a token gesture, not a partnership. The humans tried to stay calm. They reminded themselves that peace required patience. They were guests in a new world and they couldn't expect instant respect. But even patience has limits. One evening, as the human delegation reviewed documents in their quarters, a message arrived from the council. It contained new guidelines for species of developing status. The rules were humiliating. Restrictions on voting rights, technology sharing, and even diplomatic travel. The message called humans a probationary species. No one spoke for a while. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. One of the younger members clenched his fists, his voice trembling as he said, They don't want peace. They want control. The lead diplomat shook his head gently. They want to see if we'll beg for their approval, he said. That's the test. The next morning, the humans returned to the chamber with composed faces. They listened to another long speech from the council leader about interspecies order and hierarchies of progress. Each sentence made it clear that the council saw Earth not as an equal partner, but as a project to manage. When the council opened the floor for discussion, the human representative spoke again. His words were calm but firm. He reminded them that peace was not possible without respect, that cooperation meant equality, not obedience. He spoke of the millions of humans who had worked, dreamed, and sacrificed to reach this point. For a moment, there was silence. Some of the aliens seemed thoughtful, others looked offended. Then one delegate from a powerful empire known for arrogance laughed and said, "Humans are a temporary mistake of evolution. Sooner or later the galaxy will correct it." The translator whispered the words in perfect clarity. The insult hung in the air like poison. The human representative didn't respond immediately. He simply looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of every delegate who was watching. His voice when he finally spoke was steady. "If that is what the council believes," he said, "then this is not a place for peace. It is a place for pride." The session ended shortly after. No one applauded. The humans returned to their quarters in silence. That night, through the wide glass windows, they looked out at the stars again. They had come so far, traveled beyond their world, and still found the same struggles waiting: pride, power, and prejudice. But something inside each of them was changing. They no longer felt like newcomers seeking approval. They felt like equals who had been disrespected. The lead diplomat stood quietly for a long time, watching the glowing city below. "They think we're here because we need them," he said softly. "But maybe they need us more than they realize." The others didn't answer, but they understood. The warmth that had brought them here was turning into something colder. Resolve. Outside, the stars still burned with the same calm light. The galaxy was vast and ancient, filled with countless civilizations. But among them all, the humans were beginning to learn a truth that would change everything. Respect cannot be demanded, only earned, and sometimes it must be earned by walking away. As the human ship prepared for another day of talks, no one could predict how quickly everything was about to change. For now, they still believed peace was possible, but deep down they had already begun to see the cracks in the dream. The council might have power, but humanity carried something different, something that no alien could measure: the will to stand tall, even when surrounded by giants. The days after the first meetings felt heavier. What started as polite conversation between humans and the Galactic Council slowly turned into a battle of patience. Every meeting, every discussion carried a quiet tension. The humans tried to stay calm, tried to show respect and discipline, but the air around them was full of unspoken arrogance. When the delegation walked through the long silver halls of the council building, whispers followed them like shadows. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make them feel unwelcome. Some aliens turned away when they passed. Others stared openly, their faces showing curiosity mixed with disapproval. It wasn't anger. It was the same look someone gives to a stray animal that wandered too close to the dinner table. The humans ignored it as best as they could. They were here for peace, not popularity. They reminded themselves that Earth had a long history of being underestimated. They had faced worse challenges before: wars, famine, division. They could handle a few insults, but each day, the small humiliations started to build up. During the next council session, the humans presented a report. It contained ideas for fair trade routes, shared energy development, and cooperation in disaster relief. It was a well-prepared, detailed plan. The lead human speaker finished his words with quiet confidence. For a moment, there was silence. Then one of the council members, a tall creature with glassy eyes, made a clicking sound and said, "How primitive. Humans still believe in charity instead of control." The chamber filled with soft laughter. The sound echoed through the hall like a wave of mockery. The human team stayed still. No one replied, but inside, every person in that group felt the same burning frustration. They had worked hard for this moment, believed in peace, and now they were being treated as children in a room full of elders. Later that day, at a reception organized by the council, the humans tried again to bridge the distance. They walked through a garden of glowing plants and silver fountains, speaking politely to alien delegates. Some nodded in response but quickly turned away. Others listened only to mock Earth's history, asking questions like, is it true you still fight over land? Or, how can a species with so much emotion claim to be peaceful? The human diplomat smiled politely every time, never losing her calm. But as she walked back to her team, her smile slowly faded. They don't want to understand us, she said quietly. They've already made up their minds. Her words hung heavy in the air. That night, the team gathered in their quarters. The glow from the city below reflected on the walls as they sat around a small table, tired but still determined. They talked about what had happened, how their ideas were ignored, how the council treated them like students, not equals. One of the younger team members slammed his notebook shut and said, "We shouldn't just sit and take this. We deserve respect." The leader looked at him and replied calmly, "Respect isn't given freely. It's earned. And sometimes it's tested." He paused, then added, "If we lose control, we prove them right. If we stay calm, we show them who we truly are." So the humans went back to the meetings with calm faces. They spoke clearly, avoided arguments, and focused on solutions. They tried to prove their value through actions, not words. But the council seemed determined to push them further. During one meeting, the human representative was presenting data when the translation system suddenly failed. The alien delegates started talking over him, acting as if he wasn't even there. When the translator was fixed, the council leader simply said, "We'll continue without further input from the humans. They lack the experience to understand this matter." The insult was public. The humans could feel hundreds of eyes watching them. Some aliens looked away in discomfort, but most seemed amused. Still, the humans remained silent. They didn't argue, didn't walk out, didn't show anger. They took notes quietly, their dignity untouched by the mockery. After the meeting, one of the alien aides approached the human diplomat. She was young and kind-eyed, clearly uncomfortable with what had happened. In a low voice, she said, "You must forgive them. The council has never accepted a new species in thousands of years. They see you as a threat." The diplomat gave a soft smile. "A threat?" "Yes," the aide said. "You learn too fast. You build too fast. You fight too hard to survive. That frightens them." The human nodded slowly. "Then maybe they should stop trying to control what they fear," she said quietly before walking away. The next day, things grew worse. The council announced new conditions for peace cooperation. They wanted humans to share all their military data, restrict their expansion beyond Earth's solar system, and submit all new technologies for council approval. The humans were stunned. It was supposed to be a peace alliance, not a surrender. When the human leader asked for clarification, a council member said, "It's for your own good. Young species often harm themselves without guidance." The tone was kind, almost parental, but the meaning was pure dominance. The humans didn't argue right away. They asked for time to review the proposal. But as soon as the meeting ended, they returned to their quarters in silence. The quiet was heavy. No one wanted to speak. The leader finally broke the silence. "They don't want peace," he said. "They want to control how we grow." Another member sighed. "If we refuse, they'll call us aggressive. If we agree, we become slaves." The leader looked at the flag of Earth hanging on the wall, a simple cloth yet full of meaning. He thought about the people back home, the generations who had worked to reach the stars, the scientists, engineers, and dreamers who had believed this moment would mark a new beginning. "We won't beg," he said firmly. "We came here in good faith. But if they can't see our worth, that's their blindness, not our failure." That night, the human ship's communication channels buzzed with messages from Earth. News outlets on both planets were watching closely. The Council's treatment of humans had not gone unnoticed. Even some alien journalists were questioning the Council's arrogance, but none of that comforted the humans sitting in their quarters, watching the stars through the large window. The youngest member stared at the galaxy outside and said, "Do you think we made a mistake coming here?" The leader thought for a long moment before replying, "No, seeking peace is never a mistake, but trusting prideful hearts might be." Outside, the alien city glittered with beauty, but it no longer looked welcoming. The humans had come with open hands, but now those hands were slowly closing, not in anger, but in resolve. They understood something new that night. Peace without respect was just another form of control. The next morning, when they entered the council chamber again, the air felt colder. The aliens greeted them with polite words, but the humans could sense the same hidden mockery. The leader looked around the vast hall, his eyes calm but sharp. Inside, he had already made his decision. The council thought the humans were too emotional, too fragile, too inexperienced to stand among them. They didn't realize they were pushing them toward a moment that would change everything. The humans would not shout. They would not fight. But they were learning fast. And when they finally decided to act, the galaxy would remember. For now, they stayed quiet, listening, waiting, and watching as the council continued to underestimate them. The humans had come seeking peace, but soon the council would discover that Earth's patience had limits, and that sometimes, silence is the loudest warning of all. The third day of the peace conference began with silence. The humans arrived early, walking through the long silver corridors of the council building with steady steps. The air was heavy, almost tense, as if the walls themselves were listening. They had spent the entire night going over the council's new proposal, the one that would take away humanity's freedom. It wasn't a peace offer. It was a leash disguised as diplomacy. The leader of the human delegation stood by the viewing window before the meeting started. He looked down at the shining city below. The alien towers glowed in soft blues and golds, a beautiful world built by many species. But beneath that beauty, there was pride, fear, and control. He sighed quietly. Humanity had fought wars, survived extinction, and risen from ashes before. They had come here hoping to build a future of trust. But the council had shown that respect was something it never intended to offer. When the meeting began, the council chamber was full. Reporters from across the galaxy had come to witness the signing of the peace accords. They didn't know what the humans knew, that the peace being offered wasn't peace at all. The humans took their seats quietly while alien delegates murmured among themselves. The council leader, a tall and ancient figure, began to speak in his deep, echoing voice. Today, he said, marks a new beginning for the young species known as humanity. Under our guidance, they will learn discipline, restraint, and cooperation. The galaxy shall be safer because of it. His tone was soft, but every word carried a hidden insult. He didn't say partnership. He said guidance. He didn't say alliance. He said control. As he spoke, holographic screens appeared in the air, showing the official terms of the peace agreement. The humans read them in silence. Every paragraph was worse than the last. Earth would no longer be allowed to develop advanced defense systems without council approval. Human ships would need special permission to travel beyond certain borders, and the council would take charge of all interplanetary communication for the sake of security. It wasn't a treaty, it was a takeover written in polite words. The leader of the human delegation looked at the others. They didn't speak, but their faces said everything. They had tried to reason. They had tried to explain. They had tried to believe in fairness. But now it was clear this was not a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. When the council leader finished speaking, he smiled thinly and said, "We invite the representatives of Earth to step forward and accept this honorable agreement." The hall went quiet. Cameras zoomed in. The entire galaxy was watching. The human leader rose slowly. He walked toward the center of the chamber where the documents floated in a glowing projection. The sound of his footsteps echoed softly on the smooth floor. Everyone expected him to give a polite speech, to sign the treaty like all lesser species before him. But when he reached the center, he didn't look at the documents. He looked around the room. He saw hundreds of faces, some curious, some proud, some indifferent. He saw the arrogance of ancient empires and the silence of fearful allies. And he saw, high above, the banners of the council shining with their emblem of unity. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke, his voice calm but clear enough to reach every corner of the hall. "When humanity received this invitation, we believed it was a sign of respect," he began. "We believed that the council wanted peace. But peace built on submission is not peace, it's quiet slavery." The words hit the room like a sudden storm. The council members shifted in their seats. Some whispered, others frowned. But the human continued. "We came here with open hands. We came to listen, to learn, to share. Yet from the first moment we arrived, we were treated not as partners, but as problems to be managed. Every word we spoke was dismissed. Every effort we made was mocked. And now you ask us to sign away our future for the illusion of peace." The silence was complete. Even the translation devices hummed softly. struggling to keep up with his words. He turned toward the council leader. "We may be a young species," he said quietly, "but we've learned this. Respect cannot exist where equality is denied. We came here to build bridges, not to kneel." The council leader leaned forward, his expression sharp. "Careful, human," he said, his voice now colder. "You are guests here," the human nodded slowly. "Yes, guests. And as guests, we know when it's time to leave." Then he did something that no one in the galaxy had ever done. He turned away from the council and began to walk toward the exit. For a few seconds, no one moved. The other humans looked at each other, then rose one by one, following their leader without hesitation. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted questions. The council members were too stunned to react. No one had ever walked out of the Galactic Council before. Not a single species in its long history. The sound of their footsteps echoed louder than any speech. It was calm, deliberate, and final. One council member finally shouted, "This is madness. You're rejecting unity." The human stopped at the door and turned slightly. "Unity without respect is just another cage," he said, and then walked out. Outside the chamber, the air felt strangely fresh. The humans didn't speak. They didn't need to. Each of them carried the same feeling inside, a mix of sadness, anger, and pride. They had not come to start a fight. They had come for peace, and peace had rejected them. As they made their way through the station, the crowds watched silently. Some aliens stared with disbelief, others with quiet admiration. A few even nodded, as if they understood what had just happened. The human ship waited in the docking bay, its silver hull shining under the station's lights. Before boarding, the leader paused and looked back one last time at the towering city of Vetra Prime. It was magnificent, but it no longer felt powerful. It looked smaller now, weaker, like a monument built on arrogance. Inside the ship, everyone took their seats. No one cheered. No one spoke of victory. There was no victory, only dignity. The engines came alive with a deep hum, and the ship slowly drifted away from the station. Through the windows, the humans could see the glow of the council world fading behind them, swallowed by the stars. One of the younger members finally broke the silence. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked softly. The leader looked out at the endless stars and replied, "Sometimes doing the right thing means walking away. We didn't lose peace today. We protected it from becoming something false." The crew nodded quietly. As Earth's flag shimmered on the ship's hull, a strange calm filled the room. They knew the galaxy would talk about this for years. Some would call it pride. Others would call it courage. But for the humans, it wasn't about pride or defiance. It was about self-respect. Back in the council chamber, chaos broke out. Delegates shouted, reporters demanded explanations, and the council leader sat in stunned silence. For the first time in centuries, someone had dared to say no. It was a word the council wasn't used to hearing, and deep down they knew this moment had changed everything. On board the human ship, the stars grew brighter as they moved farther away. They didn't know what would come next. Anger from the council, isolation, or maybe even threats. But none of that mattered now. They had done what no one else dared to do. They had reminded the galaxy that peace cannot exist without dignity, and that even the smallest voice, when spoken with truth, can echo louder than an empire. As the ship entered the dark stretch of space, the leader sat quietly in his chair, watching the blue glow of Earth appear in the distance. A faint smile touched his face. "They'll understand one day," he whispered. "Maybe not now, but they will." The others looked out the window, following his gaze toward their home. The Earth looked small, fragile, and yet unbreakably strong, just like the people who lived there. And so, while the council tried to make sense of what had happened, humanity returned home not in defeat but in silent triumph. They hadn't won a treaty, but they had won something greater: their pride, their freedom, and their place in the stars. They didn't know it yet, but their quiet walkout would become the story that the galaxy would never forget. The day the humans chose respect over power and dignity over approval. The human ship drifted away from the council world, its engines leaving a faint blue glow behind. Inside the ship, no one spoke. The sound of the engine's soft hum filled the silence as everyone stared out the wide glass window. Behind them, the bright lights of the Galactic Council were fading, slowly becoming nothing more than distant stars. They had walked out of history's most powerful political body, and they all knew the price for that choice could be heavy. For days after their return, the galaxy buzzed with shock. The news spread faster than light. Every channel, every planetary network, every transmission carried the same headline: Humans walk out of Galactic Council. Some alien commentators called it an act of arrogance. Others called it bravery. But most of the Council's member worlds mocked them openly. They said humans had let emotion cloud their judgment. They said Earth had chosen pride over peace. Inside their homes on Earth, people gathered around screens watching endless debates. Some feared this would isolate humanity forever. Others felt proud, saying the delegation had done what no one else dared to do, to stand up to the Council's pride. Even ordinary people, workers, and families felt a strange mix of worry and pride. It was a quiet kind of strength, the kind that comes when you know you've done the right thing even if the world misunderstands you. The Council, however, did not take it lightly. They didn't declare war or send threats, and they didn't have to. Instead, they began to pull away from Earth in subtle ways. Trade routes were slowed. Shared research projects were suspended. Technological assistance was quietly withdrawn. Shipments that once arrived from allied worlds stopped coming altogether. To the galaxy, it looked like a punishment wrapped in silence. At first, humanity struggled. The withdrawal hit hard. Some factories slowed down production because they no longer received rare materials. Starports saw fewer visiting ships. Many of the trade stations that depended on interplanetary goods turned quiet. But unlike other species that had bent to the Council before, Earth didn't beg for help. Instead, the people adapted, just as they always had. On the outer edges of the solar system, engineers worked day and night, building new technologies to replace what had been lost. Scientists formed their own networks to share discoveries. Farmers on Mars and colonies on the Moon began to grow and store food independently. Slowly, humanity learned to rely only on itself again. The Council watched all this from afar, confident that Earth would eventually crawl back, asking for forgiveness. But that never happened. Weeks turned into months, and Earth remained quiet. No messages, no requests, no apologies. The humans had simply gone silent. At first, the Council thought that silence meant defeat. But soon they began to feel something they had never expected: inconvenience. Many of the Council's systems had quietly become dependent on human innovation. Humans had introduced new medical techniques, faster ship drives, and more efficient power systems. Without human input, progress across several industries began to slow down. Some Council worlds even experienced energy shortages when the human-designed reactors started failing, and no one else knew how to fix them. A few brave voices inside the Council chambers started to question the decision to drive the humans away. They were difficult, yes, one delegate said, but useful. The galaxy needs them. Others quickly silenced him. They were emotional, said another delegate, and emotions bring chaos. But outside the Council walls, among the smaller worlds and independent colonies, people began to talk differently. Traders whispered that business had never been as good as when the humans were involved. Scientists admitted that no one worked as fast or creatively as the humans did. Some even began to miss the strange, passionate species that had once brought both curiosity and hope to the galaxy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the delegation members who had returned from the Council felt both relief and sadness. They had done what they believed was right, but they also knew what they had lost: trust, connections, and opportunities for peace. Still, they never regretted their choice. Humanity had walked away with dignity, and that was something no treaty could replace. Each night, as lights glowed across Earth's cities and the colonies shimmered like stars on nearby worlds, people reminded themselves of one truth: they might be alone for now, but they were free. As time passed, new inventions began to emerge from Earth: faster engines, cleaner energy, smarter ships, technologies that even the Council's best scientists couldn't fully understand. The Council tried to spy, to copy, to study, but without human cooperation, they fell behind. The balance of the galaxy was slowly changing, and no one could stop it. The silence from Earth became something the galaxy could feel. It wasn't an angry silence, but a patient one, the kind that made people uneasy. It was as if humanity was saying, "We're watching and we remember." Then came the first real sign of trouble. A Council convoy disappeared near the border of uncharted space. At first, they thought it was a malfunction. Then another fleet vanished. Soon reports came of attacks on frontier worlds, not from humans, but from an unknown force. A powerful empire beyond the Council's control had begun to move, taking advantage of the growing weakness inside the Federation. Panic spread. The Council scrambled to organize defenses, but their fleets were divided and unprepared. Years of political comfort had made them slow and overconfident. Their communications network, once partially managed by human engineers, began to fail under pressure. Entire colonies were cut off. Refugees flooded the inner systems begging for help. That was when the Council began to feel the true cost of their pride. Without human cooperation, their systems faltered. Their advanced technologies couldn't adapt fast enough, and when they tried to reach out to Earth for assistance, the old communication channels returned a simple message. No response. Inside the Council chambers, fear replaced arrogance. The same leaders who had once mocked humanity now sat in long, heated meetings, trying to find a way to rebuild what they had destroyed. Some argued for sending a new delegation to Earth. Others refused, still blinded by pride. "They left us," one of them said bitterly. "Let them stay in their corner of space." But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. The Council needed humanity, not because of their ships or weapons, but because of their spirit. Humans had always been unpredictable, yes, but also courageous, inventive, and relentless in the face of struggle. Those qualities were what the galaxy lacked now, and without them it was falling apart. Across the stars, ordinary people, miners, traders, explorers, started whispering the same phrase. Maybe the humans were right. Back on Earth, the people watched the galaxy's turmoil quietly. They saw the distress signals, the desperate news broadcasts, the Council's growing desperation. But Earth's leaders made no move. They had learned from experience that sometimes the strongest statement wasn't made with words or weapons, but with silence. In the homes of the human delegation, the memories of the Council's arrogance were still fresh. They remembered the laughter, the mockery, the insults disguised as advice. But they also remembered the faces of those few aliens who had looked at them with respect, the ones who hadn't joined in the cruelty. They knew that not everyone in the galaxy was blind with pride. And so humanity waited. They built. They prepared. They didn't rush to return, but they didn't close the door completely either. They knew that one day the galaxy might come knocking, not to offer peace on their terms, but to ask for help. For now, the humans stood alone in the dark, surrounded by endless stars. Yet somehow they didn't feel small. They had found something the Council never understood: strength in unity, pride in patience, and peace in silence. And far across space, as the Council's lights began to flicker and their power started to crumble, some of its members finally began to realize a painful truth. In pushing the humans away, they had pushed away the very thing that kept the galaxy alive. The galaxy had changed. The once mighty Galactic Council, which used to command with pride and arrogance, now sat in quiet rooms filled with fear. Whole sectors had gone dark, communications were breaking down, and colonies were disappearing from the map. The unknown enemy that had appeared on the borders was not stopping. It was moving closer with every cycle, and the Council's fleets were too slow, too scattered, and too divided to stop it. In the middle of that growing chaos, one truth became clearer with each passing day: the galaxy needed humanity again. But Earth remained silent. No broadcasts, no diplomats, no response to distress signals. The humans had withdrawn completely after walking out of the Council. For months, the only sign of life from their part of space was the faint pulse of their defense grids, flickering faintly on scanners. Some in the Council still refused to admit their mistake. They sat behind their glowing desks, arguing in circles, blaming each other. They chose isolation, one said coldly. Let them live with it. But others, the few who still remembered working with humans, tried to convince the rest that they needed to reach out. We mocked them, yes, said one of the older members. But they were builders, dreamers. They solved problems we couldn't even see. Without them, this galaxy will collapse. After long debates, a decision was made. The Council would send a small delegation to Earth, not as rulers, but as guests, to ask, not to command. The journey was long and uncertain. When the delegation's ship finally entered the solar system, every member on board felt a deep nervousness. They expected to see warships, maybe even threats, but instead the system was calm. The planets looked peaceful. Mars glowed red in the distance, and Earth's blue surface shimmered softly under the light of the sun. As they approached Earth's orbit, automated systems scanned their vessel. The delegation froze as a calm human voice filled their speakers. "Identify yourself and state your purpose." The delegation leader, his voice shaking slightly, replied, "We come on behalf of the Galactic Council. We seek dialogue." There was a long pause. Then the voice replied, "You are clear to land. Do not bring weapons." When they landed, the council envoy stepped out and found themselves standing in a quiet valley near what used to be the old United Nations site, now replaced by something much grander. The new Earth Central Hall was built of glass and metal, reaching into the clouds yet surrounded by trees and rivers. It didn't look like a fortress. It looked like a place built for peace. Human representatives welcomed them politely but without smiles. They were calm, focused, and direct. The envoys noticed something unsettling. The humans seemed stronger, sharper, more disciplined than before. Their eyes carried a quiet confidence that made even seasoned diplomats uneasy. Inside the meeting chamber, the council delegation tried to speak with authority at first, explaining the crisis spreading across the galaxy. But the humans didn't interrupt. They simply listened. When the alien leader finally finished, the main human representative spoke softly. "Now you understand what we tried to warn you about." The words hung heavy in the air. The council envoys had no argument. They looked down ashamed. For years they had laughed when humans had spoken about the dangers of unchecked pride, about how ignoring small injustices would one day invite chaos. Now those warnings had come true. After a moment of silence, the human representative stood up and walked toward a wide glass window that overlooked the vast Earth landscape. "You came to ask for help," he said quietly. "We will not refuse. But this time things will be different." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you mean?" one of them asked carefully. The human turned back. "We will help, but not as servants, not as subjects, and not as followers. If the galaxy wants peace again, it must learn from its mistakes. The council must change." The delegation nodded slowly. They knew this wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a lesson, one they had been too proud to learn before. Over the next few weeks, human engineers, scientists, and strategists joined efforts across the galaxy once more. But this time they did it on their own terms. They rebuilt communication systems that could resist attacks. They created new alliances, not through politics, but through trust and fairness. The first battles against the unknown invaders were fierce. Council fleets, now supported by human command ships, began to win small victories. The humans brought not just weapons, but creativity, tactics no one had seen before. They fought with precision, turning every weakness into an advantage. The galaxy started to see hope again. One day, during a long night of battle planning, a young alien officer approached the human commander and said, "I used to believe humans were reckless. But now I see you never stop fighting, even when no one believes in you." The human smiled faintly. "We've been doubted before," he said, "but we always come back." As months passed, the tide began to turn. The invading forces were pushed back, their fleets shattered one by one. Worlds that had once been abandoned were retaken. For the first time in many years, the galaxy saw unity, not through the Council's laws, but through shared struggle. But even in victory, humans stayed humble. When the Council offered them high seats of power again, they refused. Instead, they proposed something new, a different kind of alliance, one where no world would dominate another. "We've seen what pride can do," the human leader said. "If we build this galaxy again, let it be built on respect." That idea changed everything. The old council system slowly began to dissolve. In its place, a new network of cooperation was born. Smaller, more equal, more transparent. Humans didn't take control, but they guided quietly, helping others stand on their own. Years later, when peace had finally returned, the story of humanity's walkout and return became legend. On countless worlds, teachers told their students how one species had dared to stand up for dignity, how they left the greatest power in the galaxy and came back stronger, not out of revenge, but out of hope. People started calling it the silence that spoke. Even the oldest council members admitted it, that silence had taught them more than any war or treaty ever could. It reminded them that respect couldn't be forced, The true power didn't come from control but from understanding. On Earth, life returned to a calm rhythm. Cities glowed under the stars and the sky was filled with ships traveling peacefully once again. Children grew up hearing about the time their ancestors chose pride with purpose, not arrogance, and about how that choice had reshaped the stars. One night, as a new generation of explorers prepared to set out into unknown space, the oldest surviving member of the delegation stood on the same glass balcony where the council envoys had once arrived. He looked up at the night sky, where millions of stars blinked like scattered memories, and whispered softly, "We were alone once, but never afraid," and somewhere far beyond the horizon, the echoes of that silence still lived, a reminder to the galaxy that even the smallest voice, if it stands firm for what is right, can one day change the universe. The humans didn't conquer the galaxy. They didn't rule it. They simply reminded everyone what it truly meant to be united, not through fear, but through courage, patience, and the strength to begin again. And in the end, as peace settled across the stars, one truth remained unshaken. The first law of the galaxy was no longer written in the Council's records, but in every heart that remembered humanity's story. Years passed after the great conflict ended. The galaxy, once divided by pride and fear, had slowly begun to heal. The wounds left behind by arrogance and misunderstanding were deep, but they were no longer bleeding. Worlds that had once fought against each other now worked side by side. Trade routes reopened, shared technology flourished, and communication lines that were once silent now carried messages of friendship and learning. And through it all, humanity had become something new, not rulers, not conquerors, but the quiet heart of a galaxy that had finally learned humility. On Earth, life had returned to peace, but it wasn't the same kind of peace that came from isolation. This was a peace born from balance, from understanding the weight of what had been lost and the strength it took to rebuild it. The cities shimmered with clean light. Airships floated silently between tall towers, and children studied not only science and art but also the stories of the past, the time when their ancestors had walked away from the Galactic Council and forced the galaxy to see the truth. In classrooms across Earth, young students listened as their teachers told the story of the Great Silence. They learned how humanity had chosen dignity over obedience, how they had left the Council not in anger but in wisdom, and how their return had changed everything. The children would listen with wide eyes, and when the teacher ended the story, someone would always ask, "Will it happen again?" The teachers always smiled and said, "Only if the galaxy forgets." But the galaxy hadn't forgotten. Not yet. Far beyond Earth's orbit, in the newly formed Galactic Alliance headquarters, humans and aliens worked together as equals. The old council chamber, once filled with pride and tension, had been replaced by a new hall, round instead of tall, built so no seat stood higher than another. Every world, big or small, had a voice. There were no golden thrones, no elaborate titles, only quiet discussions and decisions made together. The humans didn't lead the meetings, but their presence always carried a certain calm. When disagreements began to rise, their steady tone and patient words reminded everyone what happened when pride went too far. Some called it influence, others called it wisdom. Either way, it worked. One day, during a large assembly, an alien representative stood and said, "When the humans left, we thought they were weak. When they returned, we learned they were strong. But now I see, and they were never either. They were just honest." That statement became one of the most quoted lines in the Alliance's history. Despite the peace, however, there were still small sparks of unrest scattered across the stars. Not everyone liked the new order. A few old groups made of those who once held power in the Galactic Council whispered in the shadows. They spoke of returning to the old ways of bringing back control and hierarchy. Rumors reached Earth about these whispers, but humanity didn't rush to respond. They had learned patience. The human leader at that time, calm, thoughtful, and wise, gathered the Council of Earth and said, "We will not fight pride with anger. We will wait, we will listen, and when the time comes, we will remind them again, peace is not weakness." That time did come, sooner than expected. A border world called Telora, rich with resources and beauty, suddenly declared independence from the Alliance. They claimed the humans had too much influence. that their ideas of equality were a disguise for control. Old wounds reopened. Protests spread across nearby systems. The Alliance called for an emergency meeting. Representatives from dozens of worlds arrived, worried and divided. Many expected the humans to send fleets or to issue strong demands. But when the human delegation entered the chamber, their leader spoke softly, not with anger but with something deeper: understanding. He said, "If Telora wishes to walk its own path, we will not stop them. Freedom is a choice, not a rule. But let them remember the galaxy stands not on fear but on trust. When that trust breaks, no army can rebuild it." Those words echoed through the hall. There were no threats, no orders, only truth. And that truth did what weapons could not. Within days, Telora sent word they wanted to rejoin discussions. They didn't want war. They wanted to be heard. The humans met them openly, welcomed their concerns, and offered compromise instead of control. Slowly, the fire of rebellion died down, replaced by cooperation. The galaxy watched this unfold with quiet awe. Once again, humans had shown their greatest strength, not in battle but in patience. Years turned into decades. The Alliance grew stronger and more connected. Worlds that had once been strangers now called each other allies. Great cities were built not on single planets but across shared space stations orbiting twin stars. Trade flowed easily. Cultures mixed freely. Art and music from 100 worlds filled the airwaves. And through it all, the memory of the humans' walkout and return lived on as a lesson. Every year, on the anniversary of that first day when Earth had left the Galactic Council, the galaxy celebrated Unity Day. Across planets, people lit small lights, symbols of respect and humility. It wasn't just a human tradition anymore. It belonged to everyone. On one such Unity Day, an old human woman stood on a balcony overlooking the shining Earth and said to her grandson, "We thought peace would come from power, but peace only came when we learned to listen." The child looked up and asked, "Will the stars ever fight again?" She smiled faintly and said, "They might. But if they do, they'll remember who they are first." Far beyond Earth, near the edge of the galaxy, human explorers were already preparing new ships. They were going beyond known space, and not to conquer but to understand. Humanity had once been desperate to prove themselves. Now they were simply curious again. They didn't seek thrones or empires. They sought knowledge, friendship, and balance. Before departure, the fleet captain sent a short message to the Alliance Council. "We go where no map exists, not to rule, but to learn. If we find others, we will greet them as we wish we had once been greeted, with respect." That message was archived in the Alliance records, marked as one of the most important transmissions in galactic history. As those new ships vanished into the black ocean of space, the galaxy watched silently. The stars shimmered like witnesses to an old truth. That strength wasn't measured by how loudly one commanded, but by how quietly one endured. Back on Earth, in the quiet of night, lights from orbit reflected off the oceans. The world that had once been mocked for its emotions, its imperfections, and its humanity was now the heart of the galaxy's peace. But the people never forgot where they came from. They remembered the struggles, the humiliation, the long silence, and the moment they chose to walk away, not because they were weak, but because they knew they deserved respect. And that choice and that one act of walking away had changed the destiny of millions of worlds. In the years that followed, the phrase "the silence that saved the stars" became more than a story. It became a philosophy, a reminder passed down from generation to generation that true power doesn't come from shouting the loudest, but from standing firm in silence until others learn to listen. And so the galaxy moved forward. No grand wars, no golden thrones, just countless voices working together, building something better. In the end, the galaxy learned what humanity had known all along, that peace is not a gift someone gives you. It is something you build, protect, and carry inside you, no matter how vast the stars become. And though centuries would pass, the story of the humans, the species that once walked away and taught the galaxy humility, would never fade. It would live in songs, in classrooms, in monuments across alien worlds. It would remind everyone that respect and understanding are the only real powers worth having. And somewhere in the farthest corners of the universe, where the explorers' ships disappeared into the unknown, a quiet voice still whispered the truth that had reshaped the stars.